So we have some big news in regards to Tesla that I'm sure a lot of people are excited about. By the way, let's go ahead and get the elephant out in the room. I am in the car, fiance is driving, so I'm being a bit of a passenger princess, right? But I think if the future is bright, then perhaps we may all end up being passenger princesses, right? With the idea of autonomous vehicles actually becoming a reality, which brings me to my next point in regards to Tesla, right? Because we are at a forefront for a very pertinent moment in Tesla's history. As we know, next month in June, we have the robo-taxis taking place in Austin, Texas, right? And that's kind of going to be seen as what could potentially take place in the future for Tesla. And right now, from a technical perspective for Tesla, I have my phone here, right? Just looking at the charts, right? Because it's kind of difficult to do that just off memory and the car. And for Tesla, we're actually hitting an area of resistance that we kind of hit back in the early March 25th. And we're kind of testing it for the third time. We hit it again back later in the beginning of April, actually. So 287. Now, this is interesting because Tesla's actually been rising up despite the fact that they had a pretty bad earnings, right? We talked about how the earnings were bad, and indeed it was, but there's still a lot of premium being paid for Tesla, for the actual stock, for the, you know, with the idea of robo-taxis, right? Well, of course, we're losing money, or not losing money, but we're not making as much money as we did before in terms of profit margins with the actual, hard assets, like, making these vehicles and selling them and manufacturing them. And then, of course, brand sentiment was diminishing. But the idea that everyone has is like, okay, well, FSD, right? FSD is taking place in the future, which is pretty interesting because sometimes you have to hear a different perspective from someone else. Because I was talking to someone about Uber, and Uber, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to this, but Uber is nearly close to 40% year to date. I think it's like 35-ish, while Tesla is, down for the year to date, right? And one thing I didn't hear before, right, because it's not like I'm paying attention to every single company listed on, every exchange, right? I'm paying attention to a few sectors that I find interesting, that I feel like there's definitely going to be some alpha to beat the benchmark, which is the S&P 500. So long story short, Uber is not really, it was never on my radar. And so, I started having this conversation with a friend of mine, right? And he mentioned, look, Uber is going up because Uber is the sole beneficiary of autonomous driving. And I never heard of that perspective before. Maybe you guys have. But he mentioned that if Tesla solves FSD, or if it's Waymo, or if it's any other company, the company that benefits tremendously would actually be Uber, because they don't have to worry about, the hardware, right? Making the actual cars, where they just provide the service, right? They just provide the service that's scalable, right? The ride hailing services that they provide. Of course, they also provide Uber Eats, which I indulge in far too often than I should. But nonetheless, they provide the service, and they could easily partner with the company that provides the hardware, be it, Tesla in the future or Waymo, right? Of course, many are speculating, well, yeah, Waymo has a LiDAR, but Tesla is going to be able to scale much more efficiently, and so that's why Tesla is going to be the leader in autonomous driving. Regardless, even if Tesla is the leader in autonomous driving, the concern is it may not be the leader for long. They may not have that first mover advantage. And so, what this friend of mine was mentioning is that, of course, the reason why Uber is going up is because of the idea that people are going to just be able to use robo-taxis or autonomous driving for Uber in partnership with obviously the services that Uber provides, to go ahead and have Uber gain this massive cut, which is pretty interesting. Never really considered that. Again, Uber hasn't been on my radar, right? When I'm looking at the markets, I'm looking at a few sectors, right? I often look at sector rotation. We talk about that within the Push and Profit private group. For example, there's always an area in the market that is doing well when another area is doing poorly, right? For example, when Tesla was falling down, and I made video after video after video talking about how Tesla's falling down, and how, I had already sold my Tesla stock when it was at, the top, or actually a little before the top, way before the top, actually, right? I didn't catch that huge run up when, Trump got elected, right? And we had that run up from Tesla that was kind of just like paperless, right? Because it was just the idea of deregulation, and then, nothing meaningful or of any substance change for the company fundamentally, right? And that's why we ended up seeing Tesla stock fall down, because you see stocks revert back. They revert back to their fundamentals, right? And so that's essentially what ended up happening with Tesla. And so, while Tesla stock was falling down, well, I was looking at different pockets in the market, right? In the beginning of the year, we did an excellent trade idea with HIMS. HIMS did a crazy amount. We ended up selling, and then I ended up buying back into HIMS, and then slowly just continuously buying into HIMS again because I saw the potential fundamentally. They're doing a lot of great things with a lot of different drugs, not just the hair loss drugs or the weight loss, like the... I'm trying to think of the pill. What's the pill that everyone takes? Ozempic, right? The kind of generic Ozempic that they were providing. And now, I recently just had some calls that did, pretty well for HIMS. Exited out of those. I'm just in the share. So always looking at different pockets in the market. And so right now, still not currently in Tesla. Again, you guys should only trade and invest in whatever you see value in, right? Just don't copy me blindly. But I wanted to also kind of highlight what's currently going on because we're still in the midst of earnings season, right? I know it seems like we had a lot of earnings already come out, but we're still not completely done, right? 70% of the S&P 500, have my notes right here on notes, reported earnings already, and 76 beat estimates, which is great because historically the 10-year average is around 75%. So we're slightly still doing better for Q1. Now, I say Q1 because that's important to know, right? We got to talk about the next few quarters because the outlook for Q2 is looking pretty grim, right? It was originally at 11.3% of growth. Now it's 5.8%, and there's still a lot of uncertainty. And again, we're talking about analysts' predictions, which, they just revise like 1 week before earnings anyway. So as of now, earnings for Q2 have already dropped significantly, but earnings for Q2 could drop even further down as we progress and we have no updates on tariffs taking place, right? That's something that's really big. Now, the pockets that have been showing strength that I talked about within the Push and Profit private group, Microsoft, Meta, right? They're doing excellent, and that's because they had their earnings and they mentioned that they're still going to be investing in the infrastructure for AI. So that just tells us that AI wasn't a fad, right? AI, people said this was just like kind of like virtual reality, right? Back when Meta was having the headsets, which, by the way, my fiance bought me it and I used it maybe twice, so bad purchase that I told her to get me. But anyways, long story short, AI is not a fad, and we're seeing companies continuously want to adapt and improve, right? A lot of, even in all sectors, even in financial sectors, right? A lot of these large financial institutions, they're implementing more AI, right? They're trying to become more efficient. And so that's why it's kind of like the gold rush, right? You have the chip makers, for example, NVIDIA, they're the ones who are providing the shovels for all these companies. So NVIDIA is also, if Meta and Microsoft are going to be committing more, that's great news for NVIDIA as well. So hearing those bullish earnings calls for those two companies is kind of like a bullish, announcement for NVIDIA, by the way, who are selling the shovels, right? Because in the gold rush, you have the gold, and then the people got rich off selling the shovels for people trying to find the gold, and that's kind of like what NVIDIA is, and it makes sense that people are still buying the shovels when there's still a lot of data showing that investments in AI has been kind of working out, right? A lot of companies are being able to become more efficient. Now, where there's weakness is, of course, the companies that are having a lot of exposure to the tariffs, right? Think of your Amazon, right? A lot of stuff from China. Think about even companies, I have it right here, like McDonald's, Starbucks, Chipotle. And the reason being is because traffic slowdown, right? The main concern with these tariffs is it's going to be a bit challenging. I'm just watching the road. It's going to be a bit challenging for consumers to still go out to eat if we end up going into a little mild recession. Now, again, we just had one negative quarter, or technical recession is 2 consecutive negative quarters. However, I went through within the Push and Profit private group why, or really delving into what we actually saw with Q1 for GDP numbers, and it honestly wasn't that bad, which is why I'm not too pessimistic for the second quarter, right? I could go into it here, but essentially just to kind of talk about it real quickly, we ended up seeing a lot more imports in anticipation for a lot of these companies buying overseas to import it before the tariffs, and so that was a huge factor for why we ended up seeing GDP numbers not look too solid, right? But I don't think that that's going to be a huge problem from Q2, and this is me trying to be optimistic, of course, right? I'm trying to, you know, I'm not trying to be a perma-bull, but I'm also just trying to have a little bit of optimism, although we haven't heard any announcements whatsoever with a lot of these companies or countries that we are hearing about trade deals being announced, right? It's kind of a bit odd, right? We're hearing on one end Trump saying, oh, we're having great talks with China, and then we kind of hear the Prime Minister of China saying, we're not talking with you. So a bit odd, but not just China, a lot of countries, I keep saying companies. India, there's supposedly a lot of progress with India coming with their deal and negotiations, so optimistic that hopefully once we get one down, we could try to see if we could have more countries, just talk about companies so often, it's often I don't know why I'm mixing it up, but you have to pay attention to things from a global macro perspective as well. You just can't look at companies, you have to look at countries. So with that said, you know, sorry, I'm just getting worried about you know, you drive on the road and you realize it's a death trap. And who knows, maybe a fully autonomous vehicles may make things better, maybe it'll make things worse, who knows. But again, the outlook here is look for those pockets where there is strength and avoid those pockets where there's weakness. Where does Tesla fall in? Well, Tesla, you know, of course, it's going to really kind of handle or really perform based off of what we see in Texas. This hand's getting tired. What we end up seeing with Texas with the robo-taxi network taking place, and what are the updates as far as scaling that to places across the country and then having that all over and then, you know, globally, right? What is going to be the announcements? Now, you guys let me know what your predictions are. A lot of people have really been changing sentiment on Tesla with FSD. Let me go ahead and get the road directions. Give me 1 second. We are making a right over here. But yeah, you guys let me know. Also, do want to mention that I have not been making content as consistently and often as I habitually do. Just been a lot going on. You guys could see the mess in the car, actually. Got a gift for a friend over here. But yeah, just been a lot of rearranging and kind of reconstructing. So hopefully soon I will be back up with the updates. I do appreciate you guys for watching the content, liking, subscribing, and also commenting. I really enjoy the comments, even the negative ones, right? They used to get to me, but you know, I love reading the comments. The bad ones are sometimes funny. But with that said, hopefully you guys enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Take care.